Right, this is Daf Yomi in motion number 797. Today we're going to learn Daf Ayin Zayin in Metzia, and we're going to be talking about Poalim shelo Gamru et Melachtan, that the Poalim that they started work and they didn't finish. So who gets penalized? Is it them for not finishing their job? Do they get paid for what they did, or are they penalized for not finishing the job and leaving the Balabayas stuck without having to find new workers? So the Gemara starts on Ayin Zayin Amid Aleph at 3 lines down from the top. Omar Rova Hayman de Ogir Agure the Davla. So this person who he hired workers in order to irrigate his field. Asa Mitra, and then came the rain, so he didn't need the workers anymore. He didn't need their work, so they didn't work. So psida the Poalim. The hefs, who's going to take the loss in that case? It's going to be the Poalim, because rain is something that it's not the fault of the Balabayas. Anyone could have realized that it might rain, and it's like Mazalcha Goyim. It's like they should realize there could be this possibility that it might rain, and they could also have looked at the weather conditions and also anticipated a little bit whether they thought it might rain. That's their loss. And okay, also Nara Psida, the Balabayas. So if they were hired to irrigate his field and then the river overflowed, watering the whole field, flooding it and watering it, and they don't need to do their irrigation, so then that's a problem with the Balabayas, because that is, the Gamru will speak about it. It's something. Sometimes it'll depend on whether that river is known to overflow, and the Balabayas is the one that would have likely known about it. But it's not like rain that everyone is equally responsible for. Say to the Balabayas, the yoyiv lehu kipoilim batal. So in these cases where they're not going to end up working, well, in this case where it's the Seder le Balabayas. So he will have to pay them, but he doesn't have to pay them the full day's wage because he didn't work. They didn't work, but he does have to pay them kipoil batal, meaning that how much a person would be willing to take in order not to have to do their work that day. And people would. There is that type of price that even though they might make more working hard, there's still a price that people would be willing to take to have a vacation, to have a paid day off.
An idle worker.
An idle worker. He's like a poil bottle, a poil that is getting paid for not doing any work. How much would he be willing to take for just sitting and not doing any work, not having to labor hard, but to get paid for it? So it's obviously going to be something, because he's missing out on the large amount of pay that he could have done if he had done the labor but it's not going to be as much because he's not doing any work. So that's what he pays them. That's what happens when it's the hefsir to the Balabayas. He pays them kipoil batal. Omar Rova, Hai Mand Ogir Agure Lidavla. So again, this person who hired workers to water, irrigate his field, with Fosak Nara. So they were using the river in this case to direct it towards the field, and in the middle of the day the river stopped flowing and they weren't able to continue directing the water to the fields. And they had no more work to do there for the Balabayas. So that depends on who's going to be take that hefsid is going to depend. If this river usually is not known to stop flowing, and therefore even the Poalim couldn't have anticipated, and it was just a freak occurrence. So then it's going to be like Mazal Chagayrim, and the Poalim will have to absorb the loss. Ovid the pasik, and meaning that probably the Poalim will not have to pay them for the second half of the day when they weren't working at all, not even kipoil batal. So Ovid, if it's Ovid the pasik, if it's known that the river sometimes stops flowing, so then it will depend. B'nei masa pseda the Poalim. If these people live in the city and they also are aware that it sometimes stops, and they could have anticipated that this might happen when they even when they took on the job, and therefore it's going to be again mazal chagoyim. Their mazel was gorem, and they will have to absorb that loss and not even get paid kipoil batel for the second half of the day. Love b'nei masa. If they are not from that area, obviously the balabais is, and he should have warned them and told them. Then it's going to be a pesed to the balabais, because it's something he would have known about and they wouldn't have known about it. And then it's his responsibility. But Omar, maybe for even telling them in the beginning that there is that possibility that it might not flow. Omar Rabba, Haiman de Oger Agure La'avidita. So this person, he hired workers in order to do labor, work his field, whatever it was, seeding, plowing, to work. Vishalem Avidita Bipagdiyom. They finished their work quickly. They finished what they were hired to do in half the time, half the day, in half the day. So So then the balabais is allowed to give them new work because he paid them for the day, but the work that he gives them has to be either easier than the work he hired them for, or equal level of difficulty as to what they were originally hired for. But he can't give them work which is more difficult than what they were hired for because they didn't take on the job with that. They didn't agree to that job and that payment agreement based on a more difficult job.
I assume that it's the boss who decides if the work is harder or easier or equivalent.
It could be that it's
The court.
If he gives them harder work and they go to court and they say he gave us harder work, then the court will decide whether they're correct.
It's probably true. And if it's, or it can be obvious.
But initially, it would be that.
He has to decide what he thinks, but they'll decide what they think.
Yeah.
For example, if he hired them to plow the field and then they finished in half the day and he told them to weed the field, that's weeding is easier than plowing or whatever. Or maybe it is, maybe it's known in that area, which is, it's known to the people, which is considered light housework and which is a heavy housework. Inami, tikuvosebe mafkad. Mafikad, or if it's easier or equal level of difficulty, so then mafikad, then he can command him to do that other work. Mafikad lahu. Dikashemina lo mafikad lahu. If it's more difficult work, like we said, he can't tell them to do that work. In the case where he didn't find any work for them, and they are not going to be working the second half of the day, he's going to have to pay them for the full day. In fact, the Gemara, why should they be paying? Why should the balabais be paying when they aren't doing, where he couldn't find any work for them? Why should he be paying them full? They're sitting and they're not working. He should at least be paying them. He should pay them less. He should pay them kipoil batel because they are batel. How much a person would be willing to take to sit idle. And that's the amount they should get for the second half of the day. And for the Gemara, Kikama Rava, so this is the answer. Why are they getting paid full for the half day when they are sitting idle? Is because we're dealing with the type of people, Ba'achlushe de Machuza, dealing with the type of people that are porters, sabolim. They carry heavy things back and forth all the time. And their type of job, they can't sit idle, because if they sit idle, then Gemara explains, they get weak and then they can't do their normal job. So they always have to be doing something. And then for them to sit idle is not, they don't have a price for how much they would want to sit idle, because they don't sit idle. The ilo avde chalshe, if they wouldn't do work, they get weak, and would ruin their normal livelihood. So that's why in this, however, we see from here that it's because it's these types of people that they're getting full pay. But if it was not these types of people, we see that for the second half of the day, if they were sitting idle, they would get kipoil batel. Amarav or shamin lahem esmash also. Now this is referring back to the brayso that we had on Ayin Vav Amid base. We were talking about, at first the brayso was talking about kablan. We were talking about the donkey, someone who was weaving a garment. someone that was hired to harvest his wheat field, and they stopped in the middle of the day. And we had the Rabbanan and we had Rabbi Daisa. So the Rabbanan said that if he stopped in the middle of the day, we look at how much it would cost to complete the job, and according to the Rabbanan, they still get, if they were supposed to get 2 sloim for the full job, and they quit after halfway through the job, and even if it would cost to complete the job that they left undone, it would cost like more than what they would have taken for that half a job, they still get the full amount of what they did do, and based on what was originally agreed upon. For example, if they were supposed to get 2 sloim and they did half of the work, they would get 1 selah. Even though to complete it, it's going to cost 1.5 selah. According to the Rabbanan, we don't subtract it from what they are going to receive, because he's saying that Yad Poil, in that case he was a Kablan, Yad Poil ala Elyoina, and that's because we're supposed to be slaves to Hashem, and not slaves avadim le'avadim, and an Eved and a Poil has the right, therefore, in order that he shouldn't be like a slave, to quit his job anytime he wants and still get paid for what he did do. That's the Rabbanan, and that's why they still get, we said that they still get, we look at how much they still has to be done. And so the Gemara explains what the Brisa told us. Ketzad, how does it work? Haya yofis shisha dinarim. If the remaining work would be 1.5 selah, which is shisha dinarim, because it's 4 dinarim for every selah, which is more than what the original worker would have taken to do that job. So noisen lahem selah. We still give the worker 1 selah for what he did do, for the half that he did do. And Kisovre Rabbanin, and the reason for that is Kisovre Rabbanin, Yad Poil al Elyonim. The Yad of the Poil is al Elyonim. Avodim we are avodim to Hashem, below avodim le'avodim. So that's why they will still get paid for the work that they did. So, but the Brisa continued and said, they have the choice either to quit in the middle and get paid for their half, or to continue and get paid for the full amount that they agreed upon. So the Gemara says, Yigmaru Melachtan v'yitlu shnei slime. Or they can finish the job and get 2 slime. So obviously, if they finish the job, they're going to get to what they agreed upon, because that's what was agreed upon. So the Gemara says, Pshita. Obviously, if they finish the job, they're going to get paid what was based on the agreement. The Gemara says, no. Even the Brisa had to tell us that if they would finish the job, that they're still going to get paid the full amount of their agreement, because there was a story behind it. What was really going on? Lo tzricha diyaker avirata v'yomru poalim v'imru poalim. Because what happened was that when they halfway through the job, when they quit, so to get this job done, and it rose, the value cost more money to get the same job done. And that's why what was happening was that the workers wanted to quit in order to get hired by somebody else and get paid more for the same job. So they were imru poalim. Imru means that they were distancing themselves from the balabayas. They were trying to get out of the job. They wanted to quit. And at that moment, and they hadn't yet broken off ties completely, broken contract completely, but they were saying, we're leaving. So then, and at that moment, the Balabais was desperate. He didn't want them to leave, so he started asking them to stay very strongly. So, and then they did stay. And then the Brisa told us that they're going to get paid. If they would complete the whole job, they'll get paid shnei slime, like there was originally agreed. The chiddush is that they're going to say that after you worked hard to persuade us to continue the job, and we wanted to quit, and we continued because you asked us so strongly, that we were assuming that you're going to pay us the higher amount that this job is that it costs for this job now in the market. We want the higher pay for the second half of the job that we stayed on for. And the Poalim is going to say, I never told you I'm going to pay you the higher amount, and I'm only going to pay you what we originally agreed upon. And the chiddush of the Brisa is that that's what he is allowed to do. He's allowed to just pay them what they originally agreed upon, even though the Poalim is saying, we only stayed on after you persuaded us to continue, because we thought we were going to get the higher rate. And we hear that the Balabais isn't mechuyev to give them that higher rate. And we'll see in a second why.
So I understand that they're being paid by the hour rather than by the job.
This particular case is day workers. This is a day workers. These are Poalim. They're paid by the day. So
if they were paid by the job, then it wouldn't matter how long they took.
That's a kablan, and
But it would still be the same.
it's the same type of.
Finish half the job.
After they finish half the job, yes.
Right.
But if they finish the complete job earlier than
Right. So in this case,
Different case.
right. This case is the case of Abraisa, and they had finished. They were trying to back out of the job, out of the day work, halfway through the day. So Ma'udetema, after persuading them, and he did take them on. So Ma'udetema, you might think that he would have to pay them that higher rate. Ma'udetema Motsu Omre, that they would have the right. Koyachataina Motsu Omre Le Ki Mifaisinan Adaita de Tofislan Agra. That when you did persuade us to continue working, we assumed that you were going to pay us the higher rate because you knew why we wanted to leave, and you urged us to continue, and we agreed. So we thought we were going to get that higher rate. Kamashman, the Balabais still does not have to pay them that higher rate. Why? Because he himself could have a taina back. The Omar Lahu Adaita de Tafina Lahu Be'achila V'shtia. My intention, true, I knew that if you would work and I would pay you the same amount, that I would be getting more than what I'm paying for. So I intended to make up for that difference by giving you more food and drink, and he did, and therefore he doesn't have to. He has the schutz to do such a thing, and he will only have to pay them like was originally agreed upon. The brisa, like we had on Ayin Vav Amid Beis, again, they're going through each part of that brisa. Sela noisen lehem sela. So if they found that the extra amount that it would cost, we're back. Now we're in the Gemara, right in the middle of the Amid of the two dots.